What I think people don't realize is how much they allow some form of suffering to exist in their life because they are avoiding the hard conversation that will clear it up. And there was multiple times this week where I had a conversation with somebody where they were sharing with me the thing that they were challenged on, that they were struggling with. And I was immediately able to root that down to a conversation that they could have, that they did not want to have and didn't really have an intention to have it. And I wanted to break those down here for you today so that it can bring some awareness for you of where is there a hard conversation in your life that you're currently avoiding, and why are you allowing yourself to experience any form of suffering simply because it's uncomfortable to have it? Because that's what's happening here, right? Is we associate more discomfort with having the conversation than the suffering that not having that conversation is having. And what starts out as something that just becomes a little irritating in the beginning will blow up into a full-blown frustration where you hit this moment of threshold where it's you get to a point where it's like I can't take this anymore. I have to do something about it. And what we want to be able to train ourselves to do is the moment a debris shows up, the moment a tension shows up, where you find yourself fixating on a conversation or role playing in your mind something that you want to say to somebody, or you find yourself complaining to other people about somebody else in your life and in whatever role that they have. Those are all the cues for you that there's an uncomfortable conversation that is waiting for you to be had. And we want to make sure that not only can we build our awareness to when that's happening, but to be able to navigate it skillfully. And one of the conversations that I was in earlier this week was, there's a woman that she's an affiliate for a company and she sells their products. And the person that she is affiliated with makes money off of her sales. And so it was getting towards the end of the month, and that person was near some record breaking numbers here for the last couple months. And so 2 months ago, she really pushed, she reached out to her towards the end of that month, and she was just really hounding her, coming with that high pressure sales energy that just gives you the ick. And it really turned her off because it's just not the way that she wants to show up, and it's the one energy that she did not want to be exposed to in pursuing this opportunity. And it was coming into her life, and she just didn't like it, and it was irritating, it was annoying, but not to the degree where it was worth having that hard conversation for her yet. And then fast forward to month two, this last month, same thing. And here she is. Here's where it became a big conflict for her because she's growing her business. She's making really good money. It's really fun. It's really exciting right now. She's building out her team. Like everything's going great. She's loving it. And then here comes this person towards the end of the month that's just hounding her multiple times a day. You need to reach out. You need to call these people. You need to make sales. You need to make sales. And she hates it. It's not it's not the way that she wants to show up. And now, for the first time in the months that she's been doing this, she had a moment where she felt like she didn't enjoy the business. If it came with that energy, she didn't want to be a part of it. And so both times I offered up the idea of, well, it sounds like you have a hard conversation that needs to be had. You should reach out to this person and share with them what your experience is and what you're needing. And it's interesting because somebody acknowledges that it's annoyance, that it's a frustration, and you get the head nod like, yeah, you're right, I should have that conversation. But the conversation is still yet to be had. Now we're approaching mid-month, and if it's not had, it's very likely at the end of this month she's going to start getting those messages again, and this person's going to be hounding her. And what happens in a scenario like that is, your frustration builds, and that's when you get dysregulated and you kind of go into that fight or flight. And so if you go in that flight, it shows up as just avoiding the communication altogether. I'm just not going to respond to this person's messages. Now, keeping in mind that this person has no idea that you're agitated, that she's irritated, right? She's just doing what she's always been done, and no feedback, no reflection has been giving back to her on her communication. Or it gets to the point where you get so irritated that you snap. And now you send a reactive message, something like, "Can you please stop sending me all of these sales messages? It's these aren't helping. These are just making me mad." Right? And you say something that you don't that isn't skillful, that you end up regretting, and now you got to clean up that mess. And this other person's over here like, "Where did that come from? I didn't even know you were irritated, and now you just snapped at me. It just felt like it came out of nowhere." Now, how do we want to approach that conversation? Well, when we approach it, it's can we define an outcome that both people can get around, that both people would be excited about so that they're open to having that conversation? And that could sound something like, hey, can we hop on a call sometime this week? I'd really love to talk about our communication, specifically around the end of the month, just so that we can be on that same team type of energy and communicate in a way that's motivating for the both of us. And you share an intention like that, and somebody can think about it and wrap their head around it and say, yeah, no, that's the kind of communication I want as well. Because anybody that's open, if they're doing anything that's irritating you or agitating you, they'll want to know that so that they can clear that up, because it's not like they're doing it intentionally. But what happens is when we sit here and let something that irritates us build and build and build, it gets even harder to have that conversation. And even if you wait till it gets to that moment of threshold where it feels like you almost can't take it anymore, and you do initiate it skillfully, well, now you have all of this emotion that's been building around it for some time that you're going to have to navigate as part of it. It makes it harder to be non-reactive in the conversation when you've been holding on to this emotion and suppressing it for so long. And what we want to do is we want to be able to train ourselves to initiate that conversation the moment we feel any kind of tension or agitation versus letting it build to the point where now it's really intense and it becomes 10 times harder to have the conversation that you could have had as soon as it started to show up. And this is the skill that we're wanting to build. The moment some debris shows up in your space, can you become aware of it? Can you name it? Can you have the conversation to clear it? And this is how we just have consistency and certainty in our ability to communicate with anybody in any type of scenario. The second conversation that showed up is Andy and I were having a conversation with somebody, and they were experiencing a big frustration with a family member, and she was vocalizing all of her anger and her hurt around this person, and it was to the point where she felt like I don't even want to go to family gatherings because I'm so upset with this person. I feel like I can't even be in the same room with them. And it just felt like she was sharing it with anybody that would listen, but she wasn't talking to the source, to the person that she was upset with. And so I asked her a question. I'm like, "Well, imagine you go to a family gathering and you walk into the living room and nobody's in the living room except for this person. And you sit down on the couch, you look at them, what do you say?" And she says, "I'd probably just have some surface level conversation." I'm like, "Well, would you address what it is that you're feeling?" And she's like, "Absolutely not. I would not be bringing that up. I'm not going to talk to this person about that." And for me, that was just an immediate red flag. Like, here's this conversation that is creating hurt, suffering, anger, frustration to the point where you feel like you can't even be comfortable around your family if this person is in the room. And you're open to talking about it to anybody except the person that's causing the frustration. And why do you think that is? Why do you think it was such a hard no for her to have this conversation? Couple reasons. One, is she so built up with emotion, she's so angry and so frustrated and so hurt by what's happening that there's a fear that if to actually have that conversation, that all of that emotion would come out and it would create a big mess. And it's very likely that that would happen if we don't know how to have these conversations skillfully, if we don't know how to regulate our emotions in the moment, if we don't know how to have polarity to make sure there's a listener and a seer, or a listener and a sharer, to make sure that we understand the frameworks, the sequences, the structure for what a skillful conversation looks like. If those skills are online, it radically reduces the avoidance of engaging that conversation because you're not going to lose yourself in the conversation. And the other part is something that's beyond her control, which she doesn't know to what degree this person is open to even having that, or if she can be met in that skill. And that's okay, because the more skillful you become at having high stakes conversations, the less skillful you need the other person to be, because you're not going to lose yourself at all in the conversation, even if that person completely collapses. And now we don't know how long she's going to endure this suffering. This could be something that never gets talked about. It just goes unsaid until the day they die. And now there's just this tension, this disconnect that everybody can feel, but nobody's talking about. And so we allow ourselves to endure the suffering of that versus just facing the discomfort of having the conversation so that we can clear the debris. The other place that showed up was, somebody I was talking to that has been going through a divorce. And they were with this person for 15 years and very close with the other person's family. And when they left the marriage, when they made a decision to separate and move on because they weren't happy anymore. They hadn't been happy for years. There wasn't they tried a bunch of different things to make it work and it just wasn't there. The relationship had ended, the container had closed, and it was time to move on. And when she made that decision, her spouse's in-laws just immediately, her spouse's parents, her in-laws, just immediately turned on her. You know, they just completely shut her out. And this was somebody that, these were people that she considered as her second pair of parents, someone that she loved and trusted. And now they painted her as the enemy. And they were speaking negatively about her to her spouse, to to people in her community, to the point where she was feeling very uncomfortable going in any kind of community spaces because she wasn't sure what was being told to who and who believed what. And now to be in a place where you feel uncomfortable around your people, around people that you considered family, around community, because somebody is speaking ill of you, that is a very intense, high stakes conversation that needs to be had. And so I had invited her to have that conversation early on. It's let's just address it now. And there was just an incredible amount of hurt that she was feeling and a lot of fear around it. Similar to what I said before, she was feeling so much around it. She didn't trust herself to be able to navigate that skillfully, even though she had a lot of the tools. And she also, again, felt like the other side wouldn't be open to having that conversation at all. But there's a lot of power to be had, especially in a scenario like this, when somebody is speaking ill of you. Very rarely will they have the courage to actually do it to your face. And it's not like that needs to be explored per se about what's being said, but more an understanding of why. And in that exact scenario, if she were to have brought her alpha online, her seer, and invited them into that conversation, say, look, I want to know if you'd be open to having a conversation about our relationship. You were somebody that was very important to me for a long period of time. I know things have changed, but at the very least, I'd like for us to have a civil relationship with one another because there is a child involved. Would you be open to having that conversation with me? And just the extension of that invitation can do wonders for silencing the negativity of somebody else. Because you're showing them, hey, if things are going to be said, I'm going to initiate a conversation around it. I'm going to, for lack of a better word, confront you about it, but I'm going to do it lovingly. And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to do it firmly. And it shows people that you have the strength to stand up for yourself, that you will not allow yourself to be spoken negatively about. And if that's going to happen, that person's going to have to speak to you face to face. Now, it's a very intense scenario, and I completely understand why it's been such a struggle for her to initiate it, why anybody in that scenario would struggle to initiate it. You're facing potential intense conflict of that, which is why the skill set there has to be very high in order to do it in a way where we don't create that massive disruption. But fast forward, a year and a half, and now they're actually going through with the legal divorce proceedings. But these in-laws have been in her spouse's ear for the last year and a half, speaking negatively of her, painting her as the villain, and really just kind of reinforcing, into him how he needs to fight for everything and take what he can from her, and just creating a situation where the two of them were getting along well. There was still a lot of care, kindness, and respect being had there. And now that whole energy has shifted because there's this negative influence in his ear, changing the way that he sees her and changing the way that he's showing up to this dynamic. And now it's on the cusp of turning ugly, which neither one of them want, and which could potentially have been prevented if this conversation would have been had early. Could even potentially be stopped now if the conversation were to be had now, but it's not being had. And because of that, now you're seeing the long-term slow ripple effect. When things go left unsaid and people are talking about it to other people, you start to influence those other people. Negative opinions start to be formed. Animosity, frustration, hurt, tension, all of that starts to exist in the space between you and these other people. And that's the debris. And we have to be able to navigate that debris. We have to be able to clear that debris so that we can keep these spaces clear. But can you see how this is such a profound skill set? Can you see how we just allow these conversations to linger in our lives? Can you see how we allow just unnecessary suffering and frustration to linger in our lives simply because we are avoiding the conversation that needs to be had? And again, the caveat to that is you have to be able to know how to do it skillfully. Because even if you have the courage to initiate it, if you don't know how to manage the emotions that show up, if you don't know how to bring your listener online when needed, if you don't know how to say the right words in the right way at the right time, then it's very likely that conversation is going to either blow up in your face or just not quite lead to the outcome, to the result that it had the potential to lead to. And this is why I believe so firmly in this skill set as such a foundational skill for anybody that's wanting to lead in business, that's wanting to curate relationships that they enjoy being a part of, that wants to have certainty in themselves that they know how to face any difficult situation that shows up, that they have the courage to stand up for themselves, to speak their truth, and to face anything that is going to come their way, even if it's terrifying, because they know that they can manage their emotions as they navigate it, because they know they can meet the moment, and because they know they can always choose the right thing to say. And if anything does go wrong, they know they have the ability to go back in there and immediately clean that up. Even if the other person that they're talking to has no skill around it whatsoever, you can still skillfully lead that conversation to an outcome that's going to leave the dynamic better than what it was before that conversation started. And that's all we're trying to do here, right? We're just trying to make progress. We're just trying to get better every day, get better with every conversation, and get ourselves into a place that we feel good with how we're showing up in all aspects of our life. And this skill set is exactly the skill that you need in order to do that. As always, I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to what I had to say on the subject, and I'll see you next time.